Well, obviously, we're now reading about a possible disengagement with China in Ladakh. But in the meantime, remember, winter is setting in. And that means that there needs to be logistics that have to be looked after in Ladakh. And this could be a very long winter for our troops that are currently stationed in the bitterly cold Ladakh, where the roads actually get cut off for 6 whole months. To help us understand what's really going on, I have a very brilliant guest joining us at this point, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma. Let me quickly introduce him to you. Lieutenant General Dr. Rakesh Sharma retired as Adjunct General to the Indian Army. He commanded the Fire and Fury Corps, responsible for the Ladakh region of Jammu and Kashmir. He's been a research fellow at the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, and also a fellow at the National War College in Nigeria. He is a highly learned and informed person, and he's written many articles on this subject. And we're very happy that General Saab gave us time to answer some of our questions. My first question to you, first of all, after thanking you for giving us time, is to understand the logistical challenges as we go into winter at this point. How does this actually play out in Ladakh?
Okay, thank you, Faye. Thank you for inviting me. And a very logical question, rightly pointed out, hasn't been debated sufficiently in the media. The fact is that if there are about 50,000 troops normally there, they have to be stocked in the summer months. And this summer itself, the problem of Ladakh region is that the roads are blocked for 6 months a year. So Zojila gets blocked sometime in, say, October, and the Rohtang may get blocked even earlier, and they remain blocked for 6 months. So you have to stock these all these places from Kargil to Siachen Glacier and Eastern Ladakh all in this period of 6 months. Of course, we have an advantage now when we have very heavy lift aircraft like the C-130 and C-17s, which help us so much. But see, one of the biggest issues is fuel for warming purpose. You have to keep this large number of people warm because it's so bitterly cold and so bitterly windy. So one of the largest convoys that move is basically carrying fuel for warming purpose, and it has to be dumped into places because you can't depend on passes to be open. So the passes from Zojila onwards towards Leh, and from Leh towards the Siachen Glacier, which is Khardungla, or going to Eastern Ladakh, Changla, all these passes tend to get blocked. So everything has to be moved in a time frame of these summer months, which is 6 months a year. And we had a problem till the time this bridge came up in DSDBO road, which everybody knows. You could not supply the area of Daulat Beg Oldi in the summer months, because summer months the river becomes in spate, and that Shyok river, and it's not crossable at all. So you can supply those areas only in the winter months when the river gets frozen, and you drive the convoys on this DSDBO road in the winter months because of you'll be able to cross the river. So it was ulta there. It's the other way around in Daulat Beg Oldi. While other parts of the of Ladakh are being supplied in winter, they have to be supplied in summer. Daulat Beg Oldi has to be supplied, or SSN as we call it, subsector north, has to be supplied only in winter months. So there is a Herculean task of managing it. And now you're rightly saying it also includes warm clothing, special clothing, and special food. And there is a finite amount of special clothing that we can manage for these troops which are being changed over, and they're coming in. Now when we have larger number of people there, I'm sure it must be exercising the minds of the logisticians as to how we will adjust on the winter clothing, fuel for keeping them warm, as also providing habitat. Habitat will not exist, and also for purpose of getting them into that kind of food stuff. So in all these baskets, I think they have got work cut out in case this large number of people that we got them there have to spend the winter also there.
General Sharma, also along with the people, and you said quite rightly, feeding, keeping warm clothing, keeping people healthy, because if we don't keep them warm, that is, it's not habitable, that environment. But it's also about the maintenance of equipment and tanks, the armored corps that we've moved equipment into those areas. What does it take really to maintain, for the civilian audience, what does it take to maintain a tank at those altitudes? We say in Delhi. What's the difference?
Okay, look, in the turnover of units, the heavier equipment doesn't move down. So, you know, like a tank regiment is changing over, the tank regiment leaves the tanks behind and the new regiment coming in takes over those tanks. And tanks and other equipment have been placed into the right places as they're required to do so. The purpose of war, it also includes ammunition, and also the ammunition which many others try as for purpose of training. So it's been stocked in that manner that it is facilitates it. But you know, the equipment has got a life here. You know, you see an engine, if you know you don't start it, it will die even in the cold of Delhi. So you have to keep starting your own car at all times. Even if the tanks are not moving, you have to keep them warm. Otherwise, the engine would have damage to the effect. So the systems have been worked out to keep the tanks warm also to a temperature, so that they are, and the, you know, their optical instruments are kept separately, so they are also managed in a manner so that it, you know, they don't get damaged. So the whole exercise has been worked out. It's not, we are not new in the game. We've been doing this for last, you know, very long time, and the tanks have been there for 10 years. So you know, the management of these A vehicles, as we call larger vehicles, and the smaller vehicles is done in a very systematic manner. Otherwise, in 2 years you will have an engine seizing. Then how do you change the engine there? You can't change a tank engine so easily there, because it has to be taken to a larger workshop. So we have to work 10 times more than in Delhi, say, or even in deserts or in plains, there to make sure that engine lasts its full life. You can't afford to have an engine dying, or you know, the optical instruments being damaged, because the replacements will be very difficult to come by.
General, do you believe that the pullback that we're reading about right now will result in some of our troops also being brought down or brought back from there, or are they likely, in your opinion, to be preparing for a longer winter with, you know, with full troops on that border?
Look, when I read into this whole situation, you know, before they ventured into Galwan and before they ventured into Pagong So and the hot springs, etc., they brought these two divisions behind. You know, these 20,000 odd people, the Chinese brought behind, and they kept them as part of their security, safety purpose, just in case something escalates. So they had the forces there. So our movement of troops to those areas is kind of a mirror deployment. We have to now cater for an eventuality. Though rightly so, most of the passes will get frozen in time, and by October, November, and we hope in this de-escalation process that takes place. I'm not saying disengagement, but de-escalation process that takes place, these divisions which he has brought from Xinjiang, most probably Xinjiang, go back to Xinjiang, and we are also able to relieve part of our forces to come down into peace station. It has to be worked out on both sides, and I'm sure this is being debated at length when we do the meetings at Trishul or Moldo.
You wrote a column in June for the Indian Express where you said the army must revisit strategies on the northern border, especially when it comes to engagement with China after what had happened in Galwan Valley, where we lost 20 of our soldiers. Do you still believe that ought to be done? And what is your opinion right now what the strategy ought to be?
Look, Faye, you know, it's a very valid question, and a question which I've been exercising my own mind for quite some time. The fact is that we have been discussing with China on this line of actual controls in 1981 onwards. We have had joint working groups from 1988, and you know, this SR's meeting from 2005 onwards. All these meetings, there not have been an iota of progress on delineation or demarcation of the line of actual control. So it's 40 years we have not come to a via media. Now, the protocols that were decided in 1996 and 2005, where you were disengaging when your patrols came in contact, those protocols are willy-nilly finished in this, in what's happened, not even what's happened in last 2 months, but what's been happening over a period of last 6-7 years. When the patrols come in contact with each other, they were not disengaging. And they were fisticuffs, you know, the brawls that were taking place. Not a good idea. This is not how good armies behave. But it was increasing from 2013 till we come to 2020, when we have these 20 casualties. Now, at this time, weapons were not used. But then there is a question of self-defense of people, self-defense of the of the unit, raise this, that there are large number of areas for the imagination of the country. But the other fact is that there are Gongso type areas also existing there. So if he can sit in Gongso today, tomorrow he can go and sit somewhere else. And again, the nation will ask the army, why did you take precautions there? So the fact is that we have to now change the protocols. Firstly, change the border management posture. How are we going to manage the disputed areas? And if a brawl takes place, how are we going to extricate ourselves tactically or do it in whichever manner? So I stand by what I wrote in Indian Express and many other columns I've written, and I've said so, that the whole systemic of managing the border will be re-evaluated because we have a deceitful enemy and we have an enemy who's shown cunningness, and there is no guarantee of what he's going to do tomorrow. So there is absence of trust. In absence of trust, you have to change the systemic that we were following till date.
Was there always absence of trust? And I want to understand what this was like when you were serving in that neighborhood. Was there a sense of, mistrust then as well?
Look, I said no. It started in 2012, 2013. 2013, he came and sat in a place in Nepsang and refused to move out. And it was a protected thing for 3 months there. Subsequently, I was also there, and later on also they have been this kind of situations where we sat opposite each other for longest time. This is not what protocols were meant for. The protocols meant you meet each other, you show your banners, and go back to your own post. But it stopped being that. So those situations were coming again and again and again. And when you have such situations, then there is the apprehension. So the trust issue, I won't say there was a total absence of trust, but there was a deficit of trust. But as time has passed on, as we come to today, it is actually, one could say, we are devoid of trust. We are actually absence of trust. That situation has come over a period of 7 years till now, 15th of June, where we have just no belief as to what he's going to do tomorrow.
In your opinion, General Saab, do you believe that the border should be settled in order for this to move on? Currently there is a dispute on where the claim lines are. China is violating its own claim lines. Do you believe that the two sides need to sit down and settle that border once and for all? Is that the only solution? Look,
what you say, this I have written again in some media saying this line of control was a flawed concept. When it started in 1993, it actually implied, when it was first time written by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's time, it implied that the line of actual control, to manage it, will be delineated and demarcated so that there would be no problem subsequently, and the CPMs and the protocols can be followed. Now, if you have a line of control, you lay a system when both sides have different connotations of line of actual control, you just cannot manage it. It is impossible to do so. So the best via media is to sit both sides and decide, okay, this is the line of actual control as per us. Both sit down together. 2002, it happened once. In 2002, both sides sat down together, brought the maps forward. The central sector maps were exchanged also, but it did not proceed thereafter. So the fact is that in course of now so many years, it hasn't happened. It should happen. What you're rightly pointing out, it should happen. We should sit down together like mature nations and decide on our actual control. It requires a political decision making. It's not military to do so. It's political decision making because there are acts of parliament involved here, which were passed in 1963. So the fact is, a political decision has to be arrived at as to what is the line of actual control, and then the armed forces go and manage it there. Present situation is actually fraught with immense amount of dangers of escalating.
And again, I'm coming back to your to one of the columns that you had written, and I find this interesting. You have said that a major recipe for disaster that affects public and military opinion is what is served by no all experts and politicians in their conversations that they're having and debating of the issue. Do you believe that there's been a problem in our communication or our strategic communication and our public communication as a country?
Okay, treading on toes now, but I will take your issue forward. I feel that we need to be a little more open. A system of dissemination of information, I personally feel, that's my personal opinion, was wanting. You see what happened in Kargil war, if you recollect, there were daily briefings. There was a system carried out by which people used to come and brief, and questions were asked. Not everything was told. Not that national secrets were branded about in those meetings. But see foreign armies. You see what happens in Afghanistan. There is always a media briefing by the armed forces and the Ministry of their Foreign Service, who come and tell what exactly is happening. This, it puts to rest a large number of questions. And you take some questions of the media. You say some of the questions I can't answer because operations are on. But there is a two-way traffic. If there is no two-way traffic between the public at large, which is through the media, and also between the people who are managing it, then there are conjectures, then there are rumor mongerings, then there are experts of all kinds who say many things. And now everybody is got a Twitter handle, so everybody can write something or the other, and it takes you on different lines altogether. Yeah. I think we need to re-examine after this thing is over, what should be a media policy or public information policy, or we call it influence policy for the public, and how narratives are built in this world. We need to really work at it.
General Sahab, there's also a letter that has been written, an open letter by 144 veterans who have served at the armed forces, and they've drawn attention to what they call a political failure of political, civil and military establishments in communication, specifically to do with Kalban Valley. They said, and I'm quoting, the incident at Kalban could have only happened because of a failure at one or more levels of political, civil and military establishments, especially in continuous intelligence, acquisition and dissemination. Fundamentally, they've brought two things in for. One, they've talked about the intelligence failure as to why we didn't know such a thing was happening. Second, they've talked about how, like you've just pointed out, a formal statement issued by the army or the government soon after that incident would have laid to rest rumors or guesses of what had actually happened, and it would have prevented China from taking advantage of contradictions between ambiguous or inaccurate verbal statements, later needing clarifications. Do you agree with this? First of all, do you agree there was an intelligence failure?
Okay, you see, the easiest word to hit around is intelligence. So when something starts off, anything starts off, they say intelligence failure. So intelligence failure is the first casualty in the whole thing. And obviously, in most matters, the intelligence comes to be on the receiving end. But I would say that maybe there were little more intelligence required at the ground level. I have written again in one of the pieces that I wrote about 2 months ago, that there has to be a real-time intelligence. The 21st century, the commanding officer 16 Bihar ought to have satellite imagery available with him before he went across to Galwan. If he doesn't have the satellite imagery, he is going across to a per sector to see those people have tents are there or not. Imagine him having got all this information, including a drone visuals available to him. He would be gladly prepared. He would know what he is going in for. So I will not say largely intelligence failure alone. I think there is a dissemination policy. And today, the armed forces, they go across for operations at every level, have got tremendous amount of intelligence available with them. And this should be done. So I think if there is, and I do not know, since I retired long ago and I moved away from that sector, I do not know what kind of intelligence was available to them or not. But the fact of the matter is that if it was available, good. If it was not available, which I feel so, then we need to settle the ISR systems, the intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance systems, real time. Otherwise, people will be actually going into dark, and you can't put people into dark. So I feel that what the 144 veterans, they are all very revered names, and I know a large number of them. They're respected. The logic is absolutely right. We have to have real-time information with the field formation.
And last question to you, General Sahab, is do you think that proper communication would have also prevented, and I'm quoting from this letter, prevented China from taking advantage of contradictions, which were ambiguous and inaccurate verbal statements which later needed clarification. Was there also a mix-up in conversation? And for a veteran like yourself, did you feel that we could have handled the communication, based on what had happened later? Because it also affects morale, from what I understand, on the border.
If there is a vacuum of information, that vacuum of information is occupied by people of all kinds in rumor mongering or giving expert opinions of all kinds without having iota of knowledge of ground. So, it does affect, if the Chinese are masters in narrative creation. So are Pakistanis. They create narratives. So the narratives is broadcast all. We have to start making a system of our own dissemination of information to our people who are combating it. And also there has to be I'm not saying it will be a rebuttal system, but if you don't allow the vacuum to be created, then we'll be taking advantage, our people will be taking advantage from us. I think the Chinese may have had a little better dissemination in this case, and we need to do better.
We need to do better. All right, General Sir, thank you so much for giving me time and answering questions. I do hope we can continue to have conversations. And I also hope that it is a relatively more peaceful winter at Ladakh for our soldiers who are on that border as well. We wish everyone be safe.
As they say, keep the fingers crossed.
Yes, keep the fingers crossed. Everyone be safe. Everyone be warm, and all of them come home safely as well. So we'll leave it there. Thank you, General Sharma, for speaking with us and helping us understand what logistics and the situation is like on that border as someone who has served as the general officer commanding in that area as well. Thank you so much for speaking.